All right. Well, good morning and welcome back to the Weight Escape. I have another Canadian on today that I'm kind of excited. Selin Bigin. She is in Calgary. So, yes, for all of you out there, Vancouver and Calgary are not an hour apart. By flight, yes.
Yes.
But probably about 10, 11 hour drive away.
It's
But
like
beautiful,
11,
beautiful city.
12 driving. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful city. I've been there a couple times, fortunately, and love it, but do like to come home. But it is always nice to talk to somebody else that's Canadian. Like we know, a lot of you are not Canadian and you're with us, and it's great. It's great to interact. It's great to connect, like we've talked about on previous episodes, especially right now with COVID. I think it's been amazing to connect with people in cities that are nowhere near me. And to connect you guys with people that you never would have met. So I think it's kind of neat. So welcome. Let's jump in. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about what you do, and then we'll get into the why and everything.
Yes. Well, I am thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for having me. This is such a topic close to home as we were talking about before the call. So I am a holistic nutritionist. I live in Calgary, as you mentioned. I have other certifications that I'm always looking for the next thing that's going to pull the puzzle pieces together of what truly is wellness from the inside out. Okay. And so I work primarily with women who have hormonal challenges, and most of them also come to me with weight release. And I say weight release that we could probably go into a little bit later. And that's really, in a nutshell, what I do. And I work a lot with mind-body principles. I really see that everything that we see in the body is a symptom of what's going on in the mind.
Mm, I love that connection because I do think it's crucial. And I think sometimes we get so focused on thinking if I just lose this weight, I'm going to get. So I think it's really important that we're going to talk today on kind of bringing those pieces together because the weight, as we know,
Yeah.
isn't always the answer.
Yes.
So, I mean, for those of you listening, we were connected through somebody mutual, and I trust this person explicitly. So I was like, I know I am not being sent this person for no reason. But when I got on Selin's website and read some things about her, there was a couple things that just hit me, and I'm like, this is no mistake. And so I would love for you to tell us a little bit about your story because I think it is such an important message to get out there. And I know that there are people listening that are going to relate to at least some pieces of it for sure.
Yes, well, it starts with being 10 or 12 and being obsessed with supermodels. Like I really wanted to look like them, and I had pictures of Twiggy on my wall. And those of you who don't know Twiggy, as I'm sure you can imagine, just based on the name, it was this like, especially growing up as a '90s kid, so with the heroin chic, like clothes basically falling off, kind of. And for some reason, I thought that was what I needed to do. And I remember practicing like walking like a model down the road and my feet in front of each other. And I had magazines on my wall. And so didn't know anything other than dieting at that age. And I I remember at that time too, I'm definitely a little quirky now, but especially as a kid you really stand out if you're quirky. And so school was not easy socially for me in that way. And so I did receive a lot of comments that really I really truly believed. I remember my first memory of emotional eating. I came home from school, I was in third grade, and I poured myself a thing of Cheetos and I ate it. And I remember being like, I'm not actually physically hungry. And it was, again, first time that I'm like, this is an emotional thing right now. But then I kept doing it, and I found temporary comfort. And so that led me to doing that for as long as I could remember. And come when I'm in university, and this is the first time where I'm starting to really blossom into who I am and starting to discover music and different clubs around the school and start to learn another language and really start to expand. And all of a sudden I become this person around school who is the doer, the contributor. I ended up being on a billboard in Lethbridge and on the Lethbridge Herald and like all of these things. And so on the outside, I was very, and still I love being a contributor. Okay. And so I really started to overwork myself as well. And I slowly but surely developed a eating disorder that we know as bulimia. And so I found the perfect method. I was like, I can eat whatever I want and I can look a certain way. And that process continued until, again, this gets a little graphic, and I'm sure you read on my website, but I started to it was becoming an automated process where as soon as I would eat and I would go to the bathroom, and it became involuntary at some point. And I was on vacation with my family. We would go to Turkey every second year. And while we were on vacation, my family had heard me in the bathroom, and they had no idea what to do and how to talk to me about it. And so they didn't really talk to me about it. And my sister, who looked up to me, also didn't handle it very well. She would start to make puking noises in front of me, and that was very difficult. I think it's also a whole other conversation for families, how to deal with someone that you love who's going through that. And what would happen is I would start to get bloody noses, and that started to freak me out because I looked very slim. I looked exactly how I had dreamt of. I was a little twiggy, my version of it. And so I went back to school, and everyone was complimenting me left, right, and center. Selin, you look amazing. And all of a sudden, I was this perfect girl who had the body and who was doing all these things on campus. And I was dying on the inside. I was exhausted. I was drained. I was undernourished. And I started to get bloody noses off both of my nostrils, not just one anymore. And it really started to scare me, but I wasn't willing to give up how I was looking as well. And so one day, after a purge, I looked in the mirror, and I really rarely made eye contact with myself at this point. And I looked, and I noticed a bulge on my forehead of a vein that was, I guess, like popping from what I was not. It didn't pop or anything, but it was bulging. And I looked at myself like what a mess I was in, and what the image I was portraying was so different than what people saw me as. And I looked myself in the eyes for the first time in a long time. And I said, people who love themselves don't do this to themselves. And it was profound. It was profound. And it really, something really shifted within me. And that knowing alone, well, that was the second last time I had ever purged. And then one other time after that, and I stopped. And I still obviously struggled with it. And fast forward after I graduated, because I didn't have new coping mechanisms of still the emotional eating side of things, because obviously it's a very socially acceptable version of substance abuse is food. So I was just using food to cover up, and I wasn't even sure what. And so I moved to Vancouver. I was in a toxic relationship, working in a job that was stifling, in a basement suite with someone like me. I don't know if any human being will thrive in a basement suite in the middle of Vancouver winter, so strictly rain.
Gray, more gray, yeah.
Yeah. So it got bad. The binge eating got really bad. I would start to eat like loaves of bread or just cook rice and potatoes. Is all like that really heavier stuff. And it was always healthy foods too. It was funny enough, like almond butters and just that kind of stuff. It was never going to McDonald's or something. And I quickly gained about 30 to 40 pounds within that year. And none of my clothes fit. Couldn't stand looking in the mirror. When I'd go back to Calgary to visit my family, I did not leave the house, because if someone saw me, like, wow, Selin really let herself go. I did not want to live with other people's shame and judgment of me, because I was already living in that so much. And so I continued with the weight, and I'm one of those people, like I was, you hear it's like just exercise less and eat more. Well, I was exercising, I was running, I was going to the gym, I was, eating healthy, of course, with the binges as well. And so I this is like really, really fast forward. And I was like, okay, I need to make myself happy. And this is I'm almost done this part of the story, but and I started to look at, I'm like, okay, well, what is that thing? And so I just started to do like, go to dance, which I had never done for the first time, and go to like leadership courses. And I was introduced to leadership training. I had already moved to North Van at this point. And so I realized that I needed to make a shift, because I ended up going into leadership training. I ended up becoming one of the coaches there. And I realized I am so inauthentic. I am coaching people to live a life that they're proud of and that they love. And here I am struggling every single day, still with my body, my beingness. And so I made a decision to go move back to Calgary, which I never thought I would do ever. I decided I would finally go on my dream trip, which is Italy, and that I would enroll in nutrition school. And so I did all of those things within a few months of each other. And it's been a slow, winding journey back to myself. And I would pray. I would say, and I'm not a religious person, I would just say, I want to overcome this so bad, and I want to help other people with this as well. Because I know the deeply emotional process that it takes to be in this body. And always was so confused. I'm like, why don't other people struggle with weight? And I would be like, I would rather have like anything else but weight challenges. And so this is really why I do what I do, just because the freedom that living in a body and really a life that we love, that is healthy, not necessarily this model that we are achieving as a culture, is like, the more that we as women especially, and men of course, love and appreciate who we are, we go out into the world and we're better mothers, we're better CEOs or accountants or artists, whatever it is. And when we embody that frequency, the world becomes a really beautiful place. And that's what I'm here for.
That's awesome. I really, really appreciate that, because I know sometimes it's hard to go there. But it's real. And like I said, I don't think that there's anybody listening that isn't going to get something, maybe it's not your whole story, but there's going to be something in your story. And I think it takes a lot of courage to look yourself in the mirror and say, like, people who love themselves don't do this.
Yeah.
Like, that's huge. Like, that is huge. So I really have a lot of gratitude for you saying that, because I think we all need to get to that point somewhere in our lives, whether it's food, whether it's whatever, and look and say, yeah, people that don't love, like, that love themselves don't do this. So what's missing?
Exactly.
And that's the hard part.
It is the hard part, because a lot of time, like, we don't always know. We're not always aware of the thoughts that we're thinking. We're not always thinking of and then there's sometimes it's like, well, I want to follow my heart's desire, but then there's also being practical as well. It's like, what is that love? And love is also that honesty, right? So there's so many facets to it.
Totally. But I think that's that journey, right? If you want that freedom, and you want, whether it's your weight, whether it's your thoughts, whether it's, like you say, your promotion at work, maybe even, it's taking the chance to say, like, what do I need to do to love me? Because that's going to be the steps that reveal how to get where you'd like to go.
Yeah, and that's the thing, we're taught, especially in movies, about like love, like Hollywood love. It's very romantic, it's exciting, and it's like, can we love we haven't seen that many models of true, authentic love, of acceptance. And so, if so like, letting alone loving ourselves when our bodies are changing, our desires are changing, and like some of the things that we go through in life, it's an ongoing journey, really.
Mm-hmm. So now, like you say, you work with others.
Yes.
To get them through. What kind of things do you do? Like, tell us a little bit about how that works.
Yes. So because I work, and this is why I chose holistic nutrition, I look at the quality of a person's sleep. I look at their relationship about work, their relationship to themselves, their relationships with other people, and then even deeper than that. So if someone is having a constant thought, like an inner thought of, maybe they're going to sleep, like they're wanting to like, we know you sleeping at a certain time, sleeping X amount of hours, but I also look at what stops these people from doing that, because we all know about eating more vegetables or drinking more water, but I really work on the root of why. And sometimes it's very simple as, well, I need to just watch my show 15 minutes earlier, or sometimes it's more, it's deeper than, and I'm not a psychologist, but we just get to the like touching stone of, well, because I'm not satisfied with work, so I just want to keep extending the night. And then, so I go through the main aspects. I really look at, especially a woman's menstrual cycle. I ask very in-depth questions there and formulate a plan together of making sure that the nutrients required for these imbalances are met. A lot of the time, I didn't realize this myself. I wasn't eating enough during the day, and of course, it would result in a binge. I was deficient in certain nutrients as well, and so I would be looking for them in terms of cravings. Um, I wasn't eating enough protein, so I was really craving sugar. So there's a lot of those components that I look for. And then we look at other things, and we are talking about before the call. It might be that, someone is not really looking at how they're dressing, or they're as much, right? And so that affects confidence, that affects our willingness to go into the world, which then affects us weight, because we end up staying at home and not wanting to go out because we don't have anything to wear. So it's this whole cycle, and I really look at the whole picture, if that answered your question.
It does. And I mean, I think it's interesting that you said sleep. And I just want to comment on the opposite side too, because I think sometimes we get focused on high performing and people who don't sleep. But the flip side, I just want to make sure that goes out there. There are people that function by sleeping too much. And that also,
Yes.
is just important. So I just want to make sure we mention both in case someone's out there going, yeah, okay, well, I just sleep a lot.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah. Because I think sometimes it's easy to say, oh yeah, I don't sleep enough. But a lot of sleep is also a symptom of many, many, many things.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up.
Just want to point that out. What I found interesting too, on your website, you actually talk, I think you said you were 16, but about going to the doctor regarding sleep.
Yes.
And the response was, here's a pill. And
Yeah.
what struck me on your website is, even at that young age, you were like, but aren't you going to ask me about my lifestyle?
100%. I had the insomnia, and it was months. I don't know if anyone who's listening to this has ever had chronic insomnia, where this is months of not sleeping, and it gets weird. The line between reality and non-reality starts to blur. Like, it's not. I mean, even not sleeping for a few nights, we get cranky and irritable, and and so let alone months of it. And I was only 16, and I was very anxious. I was the kind of person that if you talk to me, I would go eat red, which is funny in a way, because now I do corporate wellness talks and talks around city. And so it's funny how our medicine is in what we have struggled with weight as well in that conversation. But I went to the doctor, and um, immediately I was prescribed sleeping pills. And I remember, like you said, I'm like, are you going to ask me what I'm eating? Because I was eating Wendy's or Dairy Queen after school all the time. And my family ate very healthy. And so that wasn't an issue from them. It was just myself. And when they didn't ask who I was hanging out with. I wasn't hanging out with people my age. I was, again, and there's so much to it that I wasn't asked. And I remember thinking, this is so weird. And I took the pills, and it got worse, because I'm thinking, if this doesn't help me, what's going to help me? Right? And it's funny, because that's when I had found out at 16 that my father had cancer, and he was the closest person, and really the only person at that point in my life that I actually liked. And I didn't know any other coping mechanisms of that. But it's funny, because eventually not being able to sleep and having anxiety led me to my first yoga class. And this is in 2009. And this is actually 2008, and that's when like there were no yoga studios. It was at the YMCA. So
Yeah,
yeah,
for that when it wasn't popular.
yeah, that's right.
I mean, the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because I think as a society, we've almost, I mean, I'm not blaming the medical side at all because there's
No.
definitely a time and a place,
Yeah.
but I think it's that mentality of just, oh, well, you've got a problem, here's a quick fix.
Yeah.
And I think it takes, we've got years and years of programming, and it takes someone sitting down with you and saying, okay, what is going on with this? And actually, like you say, addressing that lifestyle, because there is no one problem and there's also no one solution.
Yes, exactly. I love that you say that because it's that journey. I am a part of someone's journey, not the whole thing. I have had spiritual coaching around weight stuff. I've had like chakra cleansing. I've gone to naturopaths. I've had 3 different personal trainers and movement. Actually, I love that you are training people, that you train people, because there's nothing that has been more effective and confidence elevating and life changing than movement. I did not exercise at all growing up, and I was that awkward, clumsy person, and I skipped gym class constantly. I almost failed gym, and so now I'm like running Spartan races and things like that. So anyway, I just wanted to make a quick little note about movement and how important that is, and that is a part of the journey. Yeah.
We actually have another speaker that talks about movement, and she's got a neat story too. But I think I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think there's a lot of people out there, and probably a lot of our listeners, that if they think back to gym class, it is not a positive experience.
No.
And I think I'm hoping I have 2 athletic kids, so they do well in gym and they like it. But I'm hoping that the system is changing, because, I remember being in high school and it's okay, how many push-ups can you do in a minute? Okay, how fast can you run a mile? Okay, but we're not actually teaching our kids and our youth to move in an effective way, or to move in ways that make you feel happy, right? Like
Yes.
push-ups aren't going to be for everybody.
No.
And that's okay. If you love them, all the power to you. But if you don't, that's okay too. The fun is trying different things until you find something that you like. And that's the key. And I think so many people in their youth almost get deterred from exercise because it comes across as this punishing,
Yes,
disciplined
exactly.
military style. And if you're one of those people that struggles or is not as coordinated as others, you're kind of like almost poo-pooed on, excuse my language for
Oh, for
saying it.
sure. And you're like at the bottom of the totem pole too in school if you're not the athletic type. Or, I know also what it's like to go and want to go to the gym and then feel embarrassed thinking that everyone's looking at you and that you're the one who doesn't know what they're doing. And I know that deters people, and that has deterred me in the past too. But really, and I agree, we do go through different courses, but I remember none of them, they were all very like group class oriented too, I found, or sports and dance. Like I just didn't want to be doing that kind of like square dancing, or you know what I mean, or partner dancing at the time. And now dance is a huge part of my life, but school in that way. But I think it's also our responsibility to find the thing that really resonates with us too. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's just, when our brains are forming through our teen years and it becomes such a bad experience, it's almost like society funnels us to,
Yes.
you need to lift weights and you need to go to the gym and it needs to be like this or it
Yeah.
doesn't count.
Yeah.
And
100%.
it's like, no, 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 no. But we've become so accustomed to it that we're almost scared to get out of the box and scared to try.
Exactly. I agree. I was one of those people. Yeah.
And the key is, as we know, like finding something you love, because if you like it, you're going to keep doing it.
That's the thing. I thought that, dance, for example, and that dance has been so transforming for body confidence. I always thought that for dance, you had to like look like a ballerina, and it was basically just ballet and jazz and things like that. And that wasn't my thing. And I remember actually in Vancouver, this is another key component of my weight and body journey. Is I remember I was just on Facebook and I was scrolling through something. I saw an event for a free dance class, and it was a heels dance class. And I walked in, and the instructor was this gorgeous, voluptuous woman who was so confident. She glowed, and the entire room glowed. And I'm like, Yes, I'm taking whatever class she's teaching. And it was a heels class. I had never done anything like it before. And very, very empowering. And from there I went and did our first dance on stage, and it was a sold out show, and I came back to Calgary, started doing reggaeton and salsa and things like that. And I always just thought like dance had to be a specific way, or like working out had to be a specific way, but and I fell in love with weight training. And that's something that I never thought I would ever do. But man, just something to do with movement, whatever it is. I think for people, whether it's fencing or badminton or basketball, Pilates, there is something for everyone, and it changes the way that we feel. Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. It's totally true. Totally true. I think the other key thing is too, like we talk about this in one of the other interviews. So if you've heard it, good, you get to hear it again. But not focusing on how long either.
Yes.
Because we get same thing. We're programmed to think, oh, exercise has to be an hour. Well, if you're not used to doing it, that's going to feel overwhelming. So the key is that you start moving. And if it's 5 minutes, great. If it's 10 minutes, great. But don't worry about, find something that you enjoy
Yeah.
doing, but don't get attached to how long you have to do it for at first.
Jen, that's how I started moving. I literally started moving. I started to go for a 5 minute walk every day. That 5 minute walk turned to a 10 minute walk, because if I just knew I'm like half an hour, going from 0 to half an hour was so overwhelming that I didn't even do it. Right. And so that 5 minutes every single day turned into Tough Mudder and Spartan races, and you know what I mean, and stuff like, and being like doing dancing on stage for like that would have never happened. And actually during COVID, I struggled initially with, because I realized how much I depended on the gym for movement. And I realized once I replaced exercise with movement, I'm like, I can do anything. I can go for walks. I can do Pilates. I can do animal flow. I can do all of these things, even like vacuuming and like washing, doing my spring cleaning. Like that's movement. The human body is just designed to move. And again, when we feel good, we start to do other things that feel good. But if we are feeling bad and we're sitting on the couch still, and then it's so much easier to bingey and then binge watch something, and then you're like, I already messed up the whole day, so I'm just going to keep messing it up. Like I know all too well the psychology of that. So that's why I think movement is key, not necessarily even for like weight loss, but it's just how you feel.
But you might know a little bit more than I do to this, but I think even moving kind of strengthens that mind body connection too, because as you're moving, it's harder to stress about things. Or if you do, it kind of moves that stress along, or like moves it through your body instead of hanging on to it. And I find personally, when I'm out moving, especially if I walk or something outside, and I take the chance to say, I'm choosing to look at something, I'm choosing to see the beauty around me, a whole bunch of creativity comes too, that I don't get when I'm, head down working, or head down, focused on other things or stressing or eating or anything else either. There's a whole
Totally.
creativity that gets unlocked for me.
It's so true. And it's like I always say this, that anxiety cannot exist in a moving body. Like if you are anxious and you're running, like I've been angry and working out and it's like a really good fuel, but feeling anxious about something and running just don't go together. You're like, wait, what was I upset about again? And you might feel less, so you might come back to the same thing. But I do feel that, and I feel that once for people who have also had trauma, and this is something that I've really loved going into with weight, is people can look at someone who's overweight and be like, oh, that person just probably eats like fast food constantly and doesn't work out and blah blah blah. Well, we don't know the backstory of why people are eating, and so if someone has experienced trauma in their life, they're moving out of their body, like they're not connected to their body. And so like you said, moving, especially yoga, I find it really helps us tune in and say like this, and I don't even know how to describe it, but you become more aware of your body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate you bringing up the trauma, because I'm seeing it more and more. And I know on a research level, we're becoming more and more and more aware of how trauma actually does impact us, not only on the physical, but psychological,
Yes.
emotional, and all these levels as well. But I think it's important that you bring up that judgment piece because we don't know people's stories.
Yeah.
And I think like your story is such a great example of, you're dying on the inside, but everybody thinks you looks amazing,
Yes.
you
Exactly.
know, and there's
Exactly.
somebody else that's struggling with their weight, looks the opposite, and is also dying on the inside.
Exactly. And that's the thing. So I want, listeners to think of when you're embarrassed, your face flushes, you might get sweaty palms, or when you are angry, right? It's just a thought that makes you angry. And so you again might have a similar response and you feel your blood boiling, your heart starts racing. Well, this is the same thing when it's with eating, like emotional eating as well, where it's just less conscious of it, right? And it's just a response to something happening in the background. And so even the thought of I'm not good enough or whatever it is, that stimulates a cortisol response. And so when we have high cortisol, to bring it down, a lot of the time we'll reach for sugar, which raises our insulin levels. And if in a lot of the time, belly fat is simply cortisol related. And again, if you look and if you so like if someone has excess weight around hips and thighs, it's estrogen related. So it's just showing our body is showing us, hey, like this is what's happening on the inside.
I really like that you brought that up because I was just I've had a lot of questions with COVID about I'm gaining weight. What the heck is it about the fact I'm craving sugar all the time?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's such a crucial piece because I had a psychologist explain it to me a couple months ago, early in COVID, about the flight or fight syndrome, right? Like when stress goes up, a bear is chasing you, you run away, your adrenaline goes up, everything goes up, and then as that threat comes down, your body starts to relax. You either burn it off, you move it off. Moving is a great way to get rid of it,
Yes, yes,
but you come back down. The problem with COVID right now is all of our alerts went up, but there's so much unknown. We've come down because we're adjusting, but we haven't come all the way down, and that's still stress.
yeah,
So for most of us, our cortisol levels are probably higher than normal.
yeah, mm-hmm.
And I've had so many people say, like, what the heck is it with me craving sugar? I think a lot of it has to do with that personally. So if you're out there craving sugar, there is a very biological, probably really good reason for it, because that cortisol just can't go away right now until this whole threat that we're facing altogether goes away. So really important that you move. Really important that you talk about it. Really important that, you don't isolate and pull it inside. But that could be a good reason why you're craving sugar.
For sure. And if that stress is affecting sleep and we're not having enough sleep, then we're going to crave carbohydrates and sugar too. Like there are so many psychological reasons why we're craving it as well. There's physical and psychological, right? And actually, you made a point on moving, like shaking it off. Peter Levine, who does trauma therapy as well, he's trained people on like people with PTSD and veterans and things like this, and he actually has a shaking exercise, right? It's just as simple, and I do this on my corporate wellness workshops, is you just stand up and you shake all parts of your body slowly, and you get faster and faster, and you notice that your body tingles after, you feel a little bit more calm. That's power of movement as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've looked at some of his work. I'm very
Yeah.
fascinated by it, and it's crucial. It's
Yes.
crucial. And kind of shake it, like that's what people say, shake it off, right?
Exactly.
There's
Yeah.
physiological reason to shake it
Exactly.
off. Awesome. So now that you've had this, experience in your life and you're working with other people, what does your full practice look like?
So I have people come to me a lot of the time as a last resort, to be honest.
Mm,
Typically after they've gone to their naturopath or the conventional system as well, and they've had people, and a lot of the time it comes from they've had fibroids or endometriosis, PCOS, things like that, and they want to lose weight. I have a lot of PCOS clients who are like, a doctor told me to lose weight, and PCOS makes you like not able to lose weight, and it's just like this whole thing. So what do I do? And so women come to me, we go over intake forms, I look at signs and symptoms of the endocrine system, digestive system, intestinal. A lot of the time we have our intestinal system compromised.
Mm.
If we're in COVID times, I urge everyone to have more fermented foods right now, because we have hand sanitizers and we're depleting all good bacteria from our
Can you
system.
just, I think that's a great point, but can you just give us a couple of good examples of fermented foods? Just because,
Yes.
you know, with COVID brain, not all of us are like, what, fermented? What's that again?
So miso, sauerkraut, kimchi, a little bit of kombucha, jun, which is the green tea version. That being said, if you are, I wouldn't get it from the grocery store aisle. Get it in the refrigerated section, because the ones by the ketchup, for example, the pickles and the sauerkraut is already pasteurized. So most health food stores will have, and actually, yeah, a lot of most grocery stores now even have a lot of these products. But make sure, because if we don't treat our gut bacteria, that also is going to impact mood. It's going to impact dysbiosis in like we have like vaginal itching and things like this. So that's a whole other kind of tangent again that I want to just stay focused on your question. But yeah, so I go over the intake forms, and then we just start from a woman's lifestyle.
Mm.
You know, a lot of the time I have women with kids who are telling me, they're like, Selin, I'm not stressed, you know, and then we work on some tools there. We look at, and I create meal plans. They're guides though, because a lot of the time we have a negative association. I would be so triggered if, especially in the past, well, I can do it now, like calorie counting and macros and stuff like that. But in the past, I would be spiral, you know, so tracking food, meal plans, that stuff is a no for me. But now I work with nutrients, like here are the nutrients to focus on. And so, yeah, and then I just have, they were kind of like coaching calls, to be honest, coaching and consulting calls. I do have a background in health coaching as well, but yeah, so that's what it looks like.
Awesome. We'll make sure we've got your information. So when this interview does go out, you guys, Selin's information is going to be connected to the email that this comes out on. So if you do have questions, I mean, obviously she's an amazing resource. Contact her, because she says she's got a great way of connecting the mind and the body, and some of your struggles maybe in places that you wouldn't even have thought. I mean, I think that's the neat thing of working with somebody, because somebody else gets that bird's eye view, and when you're in the middle of it, you can't see it, or you wouldn't even know to ask some of the questions. So just
Oh, for
have
sure.
someone else. You know?
I've even hired a holistic nutritionist. One of my teachers, like, I'm so about investing in the body and the mind, because this is who I'm with all the time. So yeah.
But yeah, so we'll make sure we've got it. Reach out to her. So before we end today, I've been asking a lot of our speakers to go back to that moment. So I think for you, it was probably that moment in the mirror of people that love themselves don't do this.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not, that's okay. But if you were to go back to that moment from the person you are today, what would you tell her now?
I would say keep going, because I've realized that every time there has been turmoil in my own life or the world, it's always shifting.
Mm-hmm.
And if I didn't go through that, I wouldn't have the career that I have now. So I wouldn't take it back. As much as I struggled, I wouldn't take it back, and just keep going, and knowing that just it's one foot in the other. It's one book, it's one person, it's a YouTube video, it's a podcast or a summit. It's all these little pieces. And so, yeah, I would just say keep going.
Awesome. So yes, we'll have all of Selin's information for you. Thank you so much for being here today. I so value the courage and vulnerability that you have to be able to share your story with us, because like I said earlier, I don't think there's anybody listening that's not going to relate to something that you've said. And I think it's so important we start sharing. People need to hear that we're not the only ones struggling, and you know, we need to connect, especially through times like this, to get through it. So thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, thank you for this time together. Thank you for doing what you're doing in the world and this summit, because it is just so valuable. So really, thank you, Jen.
Awesome, thanks. So we'll see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful rest of your day.